Welcome to Corpse Club, the official podcast of DailyDead.com. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jonathan James. And today I am joined by the spectacular, incredible, stupendous, the incomparable, Derek Anderson. And just Derek Anderson, because just the two of us. That's what you get today on this episode of Corpse Club.
That's why you put so many adjectives in front of my name, is you're just trying to fill in the co-host space.
Exactly. But no, it's you again, you are the Corpse Club VIP. People think Corpse Club, they know that in most episodes, if you were gambling, you could bet that Derek's going to be in an episode and you'd get it right most of the time. You're a Corpse Club champ.
I never leave. That's why everyone else goes home and I just stay here.
There's even been episodes where you haven't seen something that's been the topic of the episode and you've been on it. You're like, I can add something.
Yeah, they're like, you really don't have to be on this one, but we'll let you sit in on it if you want to. And I'm like, well, I'm here. I might as well.
Yeah, exactly. But no, in this episode, we are going to be talking about The Northman. We're going to be talking about The Beyond, and we're going to be talking about Junji Ito's Dissolving Classroom and more. We'll get more. We'll get to more. We always get to more. But yeah, I mean, it's, I'm excited because it's in about a week, less than a week for our by the time you listen to this, listeners, we will already have been together in New Orleans. I haven't seen Derek in person in ages. I think we figured out it's been like 4 years. And of course, for part of the pandemic that we were not able to, but we're going to be getting together with a few people at the Overlook Film Festival, where we're very excited. If you're listening to this episode on release day and you're at Overlook, send us a message. We'll be happy to hang out, catch up with Corpse Club listeners, Daily Dead readers. And we're excited. It's a masked and vaxxed event. And so it'll be one of our, at least for me, it'll be one of my first ventures out. And I am looking forward to it. So anyway, we're going to be catching up on this episode a little bit, but we're going to be catching up in person about a week from now, where we will be getting together and we'll have a live episode. That's the goal. We're going to be the next episode that comes out, the technical difficulties, notwithstanding, we will have a live episode for you next week from the Overlook Film Festival. But back to the topics at hand. I do think this is one of those episodes where it's like, I've seen completely different things and experienced completely different things than my co-host. So, Derek, I know you've been catching up on a bit. So, I'm not going to go first because I've been talking a bit, but I'm excited for you because you experienced Lucio Fulci's The Beyond. A fantastic, fantastic film, in my opinion. But what's your opinion?
Yeah, that is a word I would agree with. Fantastic. Fantastical, bizarre in the best possible way. You mentioned that we're going to the Overlook Film Festival in New Orleans this week. So I thought, I should do a little refresher on New Orleans horror. And this seemed like the perfect movie to kind of put me in that mindset. And it really does not disappoint. It is so trippy in the best possible way. I feel like it's 8 different types of horror movies all blended together into one potent mixture of awesomeness. And wow, did they really go for it with the gore? Like, it is, they are not shy about that. So it feels like as extreme as the movie is, it feels like it's a lot of fun at the same time, which I think kind of describes Fulci pretty well. But especially with Italian horror, I'm really trying to explore that further. And The Beyond is just such a great gateway movie, pun fully intended, with the gateway of hell, to get into that. So I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because, this has been like getting into Italian horror was also something that took me a little bit of time. It wasn't, I know many people who, were into it since they were young. Either they went to the theater to see it or they were picking up the VHS. But this was kind of like forbidden fruit for me. And there was no way I was going to be able to get, sneak some of this stuff past my parents back in the day. So I didn't check it out, at least, in my, my grade school days. And then, of course, I was like, well, let me see this and, let me see what there is to like about this. And there are some stumbling blocks, right? Fulci and a lot of Italian horror movies, they're differently paced. The
Oh yeah.
the audio, sync issues are definitely like they take some time to get around, or in some cases, if they're dubbed, and so I think that, like I said, that's a little bit of stumbling there, but it's one of those things that if what do you call it? Well, one, if you kind of put yourself in the place of people who saw it at the time, you realize just how extreme these movies were. And even if you look at it now, when we're a little more desensitized, you can look at it and say, well, hey, just look at what, these directors, were doing. Clearly, there's there's a love of horror, and these are monster kids, through and through, and it is a lot of style over substance, I think, in some cases. And I think with the Beyond, it is style and substance. I feel like this is kind of one of those like go-to or starter movies that I feel like everybody should see, and I'm glad you had a chance to check it out.
Yeah, me too. It definitely, like you mentioned, it just the tonal shift. It takes a little getting used to, and because certainly there's like a pacing style that's all its own with Italian horror versus like traditional Hollywood films, where you kind of expect things to kind of happen in a certain way or at a certain time in the movie. And in this one, Fulci's just like, no, we're doing like extreme death scenes right away. We're continuing this pace. Like, we're not really going to slow down at all. Not all of it is entirely going to make sense, and we're not going to explain everything. So there's this really cool ambiguity there as well, which I really appreciate, because I feel like sometimes things are over-explained in American cinema. So I feel like I really like that. I like how it kind of leaves you wondering just what the hell exactly happened. There's so much to go back to, and I think it is one that makes it more rewatchable as well, because you can go back and try to piece together certain parts of the puzzle or explore more of Fulci's filmography to get clues into the universe that he was building, the cinematic universe. And you can just see how this movie might have influenced a lot of films that followed it, and was also influenced by films that preceded it, particularly, like Romero's movies, that the zombie films that Dawn of the Dead had come out within the last 4 to 5 years, and we kind of get a zombie movie in the third act. So there's so much to really like try to grasp with this movie, and I feel like that's kind of a fun thing to go back to in the future and try to put those pieces together. And killer spiders too, which is truly nightmarish.
Yeah, that's always good. But no, there's, like I said, there's certainly a lot to love about this. And this is, and then the thing is too, like, once you find, a movie that you really gel with, whether it's, Zombie or The Beyond or House by the Cemetery, then you're like, what other gems, can I get into? And then that just kind of opens up this whole new world. So, it's, you frequently will hear about people saying, hey, there's no, new horror movies, or there's no good horror movies, and good new horror movies, I should say. And, while I certainly don't agree with that, there are also so many older movies that people have blind spots on, and you can, definitely, what do you call it? Hit up, whether it's these days Amazon, Tubi, Shudder. Like, they have such a back catalog of horror films to catch up on.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just kind of giving yourself over to the movie and the nightmare logic, where like things don't always seem to add up, but you don't really care either, because you're just enjoying what you're watching. And I think Shudder, I watched The Beyond on Shudder, and they're always so good about shedding light on both movies, new and old. So you're finding stuff like The Sadness, but then you can go and watch The Beyond, and both of them push boundaries kind of in somewhat similar ways with the gore. And it's like you can really put together some fun double features with new stuff that just came out, and then stuff that's been out for 40 years. It's truly, I wish that we had like a resource like this when I was in middle school and high school, just so I could have seen like some of these forbidden movies at a younger age, because it really goes beyond what you were able to find, depending on where you live, depending what like the local Blockbuster carried, which they might have had Fulci but maybe no Argento, or they might have had Carpenter but not Dante. There's just so many different things that you were exposed to just based on location. And with Shudder and other things, you're able to have it all at your fingertips.
Yeah, the interesting thing too, which is about, when I would go to the VHS store, but it's also the kind of same with streaming, is that I could never complete a filmmaker like characters movies. Like I always remember, like if I wanted to see all the Hammer Dracula movies, there was like a Wizard Video, there was Blockbuster, there was like a VHS place in Wegmans, which is like a local like grocery store. So like I had to go to all three to like complete my my film series. Yep. And you kind of have to do certain things too with the streaming services, where it's like maybe, a couple of Fulci movies on Amazon, a couple on, Arrow, a couple on Shudder, but there's still plenty to catch up on.
Oh, for sure. And that's a good problem to have too.
yeah, it is. So yeah, I'm glad you had a chance to see it and kind of get you ready for New Orleans. There's a lot of fun stuff. It's a fun town. Like I said, a little different for obviously, like I said, with us still staying masked and back due to COVID. But when everything opens back up to Overlook is a festival that can really sprawl out across New Orleans, and that has been fun in past years.
Yeah, I've always been looking forward to this festival, because hearing the stories from back when it was at the Stanley Hotel, and just hearing stuff from the earlier iterations of the festival, just how interactive it gets and immersive, and how it's kind of unlike any other horror festival out there. This has been like a bucket list item for me to go to. So I'm on top of getting to see you and some other people for the first time in a long time, or even for the first time ever. It's going to be really cool to experience this firsthand in a city like New Orleans too, which is, just awesome on its own.
Yeah. We should have some reactions to The Black Phone and quite a few other movies that are going to be screening. So yeah, I'm excited. But yeah, let's move on. I want to talk about The Northman. I've been thinking about it for a little bit. I had a chance to see it once it hit. I don't know what these days, whether it's VOD or Prime Video, cinema, early something, but I saw it. I paid for it. I had to make sure I said that, because then it sounds like, did you pay for it? No, I paid for it on Amazon. I bought it. And yeah, I did enjoy The Northman quite a bit. I would, I think in some of these things, what I'll talk about is I'll try to sell you or the listener on it. But, if you like Conan, if you like Conan the Barbarian, this is very much like along the lines of Conan the Barbarian. In some cases, some of it like feels like it's beat for beat, and that's not in a bad way. We haven't seen a new Conan in a while, so this, might scratch that itch. And, with Robert Eggers, kind of, being the driving force for this has, some of his like trademark, cinematic touches in terms of like, you can see that this still is, even though this is more of a, I'd say more of a, what do you call it? This is more for a wider audience, right? This isn't necessarily an art house film through and through, but still has those sensibilities that you can still see that an art house director was working on this. And so, yeah, so, it looks beautiful. Alexander Skarsgård really kind of, bulks up and has this, physicality to the role where you don't doubt that he's capable of what he's doing for a second. Anya Taylor-Joy is in it. She's always great. And, and then, Ethan Hawke. There are so many people. Yeah. Bjork's in it, Willem Dafoe. But one of the real surprises for me was Nicole Kidman. And you'll have to watch it to find out why. But I was watching, I'm like, Nicole Kidman's in this. I'm like, really? Like Nicole Kidman? And then I was like, oh, and she has the scene that kind of steals a scene stealing performance. So yeah, it's it has a lot of great things. What I will say for me, because you can hear there are like these qualifiers for me, the movie didn't stick the landing. I was on board for all of it. Like the ending didn't like I said, didn't stick the landing in it. And I think this is one of those movies where it was kind of like budgeted under $100 million. And I feel like Eggers' vision, like he made like a $200 million movie. It looks like a $200 million movie, right? In terms of scale and what he's able to show. But the end it's not able to match his vision. It just seems like there were limitations that they just weren't able to get over. And maybe it was a COVID thing, and maybe it was a budget thing, or maybe, there could be, quite a few different factors. But I think the movie's kind of running at like a 9 or 10 for most of the movie, and it doesn't quite do it for me at the ending. I know some people who really enjoyed it, but that being said, I would still, highly recommend this movie. Like I said, if you like Conan, if you've liked Eggers' previous movies, I would still say don't sleep on this one.
Yeah, this feels like, just looking at that cast list and seeing the marketing for the movie, it feels like you said, that first, I guess, accessible movie, the most accessible Eggers movie to date, where he's really getting, and it's interesting because it feels, even though like you were mentioning the potential budget restrictions, this feels like the most budget he's had to play with, like the most resources, but obviously just the subject matter alone, like this epic Viking quest for revenge, that's going to call for a lot of ambitious techniques and locations and just a lot of maneuvering, I can imagine, while making the movie. So definitely sounds like, he really swung for the fences on this one. And it's really interesting to see, from the Witch to the Lighthouse, and now going to this movie, like where will he go next? Because this feels like his biggest movie yet, and so I'm curious to see what the future holds for Robert, and who he might work with. He's had frequent collaborators, and who he might work with next as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember reading on multiple interviews that he had some struggles because he didn't have final edit. And so that was a little challenging for him. It does seem like there might have been some back and forth there. Definitely feels like there were some lessons learned here. And at the end of the day, it might not be, and again, I'm just what do you call it? Trying to read between the lines. So I may be off, but it seems like this may not be 100%, what he wanted to try to get on the screen. At least it doesn't feel like that at the end. I feel like that to me, the ending is it looks like, just visually, it's vastly different than the rest of it. And, but like I said, there are so many great things about it too. It's like, it's okay that a movie isn't perfection. You can still enjoy. And I think that's a big thing that, like, especially when you think about like Rotten Tomatoes, right? It's either like, is it rotten or is it fresh? And that's how a lot of people, you'll see on social media, like it's like, picking apart a movie or saying like it's bad if it's not flawless. And every movie has a flaw here and there. You can always find little things to pick out. And so for me, it's, did I enjoy it? Is there, did I enjoy watching, because again, it takes hundreds of people. It takes thousands of people to make a movie. Did I enjoy what they put together? Did they do a good job? And yes, it's, I enjoyed it. They did a great job. Would I like to have seen, a few things, a few changes here and there? Sure. But at the end of the day, I'm not the one who made the movie. So, and probably for the best there.
So one day there could be potentially like an Eggers cut, if they actually did film things that got edited out, versus, unless, it wasn't made initially how we wanted.
Maybe.
Could there be stuff on the cutting room floor that we see like 10, 20 years from now?
You know what? I'd say, it's definitely a possibility. It tends to happen more as a director becomes more popular and gets more clout. Like, think about Ridley Scott, right? Ridley Scott couldn't do anything about Blade Runner. And again, just kept new cuts, director's cut, ultimate cut, all of these different things. And then Ridley Scott really kind of popularized that. And in some cases, a lot of people felt that his cut was superior. In other cases, there are scenarios, like I think Kingdom of Heaven, that movie's very different from what was released. His cut versus what the theaters released, or studio release, was different. In other cases, you may say that it's worth cutting, that the directors want extra, they're going to want extra time, but it might be bloat. And people go back and forth on, I was thinking not Ridley Scott, but James Cameron, his director's cut of Aliens. Is it worth it to have the granddaughter? Is it worth it to have the century guns, or does it or do you want the movie running at a fast pace, which is, if you saw the theatrical cut, it keeps going. Once they have that initial encounter with the aliens, it doesn't stop. So yeah, it's like I said, TBD on that. But like I said, I still really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see what he does next, which might be Nosferatu. He's been talking about doing a remake of that for a little bit, so that might be it.
And I would like to see him direct like a feature-length version of the Nicole Kidman AMC commercial that plays before the movies, because I feel like there's a lot of story left to explore there. Like it could take some really weird kind of horror directions.
At first I was just going to make fun of it. And then I was like, well, he did work with Nicole Kidman. And so, who knows in this bizarro world, this is, anything could happen. And, again, 3 years ago, I might be like, no, Derek, it's never going to happen. Now, I don't know. That's not the craziest thing that's happened. I'll tell you that.
I don't know. There's just something eerie about watching Nicole Kidman walk around in a completely empty theater and, talking to herself, and, so hearing that she really kind of goes there in The Northman, I would love to see more of that. And maybe she's willing to go do like an art house horror movie version of that.
Yeah, honestly, I'd be all for it. Yeah, she was great in this. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I know you had another movie that you wanted to talk about. I believe it was the McPherson tapes, right? Or tape? Are there tapes, or is there a tape?
If there was like a sequel, there is like a reimagining of this movie, but if there was like a straight up sequel, I think they could call it tapes. Just do the aliens plural.
It's just tape. Just tape.
Just tape, also known as UFO abduction. But you're probably more likely to find it search term wise as the McPherson tape. And this one is something I'd been really wanting to watch for a long time. I absolutely love the found footage format. There's something very immediate about it, and it really grabs me and pulls me in. And kudos to Shudder, which is also where I watched the McPherson tape. And this is really interesting, though, because, it was originally released in 1989, 10 years before the Blair Witch Project. And if you're unfamiliar with the story, basically it's pretty straightforward. It's this guy who's like in high school, college age. He has a camera, and the story is set in 1983. So like a portable camera then is like kind of a really big camera that he has to carry around on his shoulder, but he's filming his 5-year-old niece's birthday party at his mom's house. So like his two brothers are over, his sister-in-law, his brother's girlfriend, his mom, who is his widowed. So they're all like in the woods at this house. And through the course of them filming the birthday party, weird stuff starts to happen. And they find out that there could be potential like alien invasion, extraterrestrials that have like landed their spaceship in the woods. And the whole story takes place from the point of view of this really grainy 1980s camcorder, which is like so unique and genuine for that time. I mean, we've seen like kind of the retro lens be used in found footage in recent years when they're trying to go for that aesthetic. But the fact that this is actually like made in that time with that kind of equipment just really makes it feel like you're watching someone's personal family home videos. And it's very unsettling. It's very entertaining, but it's like the whole time you have this sense of dread that something horrible is about to happen, because there's so much like mundane kind of family birthday party stuff going on, and the whole time you're just waiting for this other shoe to drop and for stuff to really go bad. And it just that's the part that really scared me while watching it. And I think it would actually pair really nicely with the Blair Witch Project for that reason, where it's like the less you see kind of scares and all that good stuff.
Now, do you think, or I guess without completely, giving it all away, does the way they handle the end and the reveal, is it legitimately scary? Like, are they able to execute it, or does it have some challenges with the being, coming out at the time it did?
I think it definitely shows the seams of its low budget a little bit at the end. I mean, we're talking about kind of almost like a 1950s style approach to extraterrestrials in some ways, and I think it leans into that maybe a little bit too much. But I still had I was still able to get past that because it was still just so, there was nothing Hollywood about it. It was very like abrupt, and it was the delivery, budget aside, it was the filmmaker, Dean Alioto, how he handled just the whole setup and kind of the gut punch of the end. Even though I think it's one of those endings where a lot of people might think, oh, that's not scary at all, just like people kind of brush off the Blair Witch Project because they expected more. I kind of thought like, oh wow, that they really went there, even though you still don't see necessarily everything that happens. So I truly, just from the whole genuine setup, but that led up to those final moments, for me it wasn't an issue, but it definitely is. You can tell that it's like a experimental kind of, let's go out and make a movie in the woods type of filmmaking, but I think it really does more good than bad with that approach.
Yeah, and definitely ahead of its time. I'm curious, and I don't know, but I'm curious if the Blair Witch filmmakers had a chance to, like, if they were influenced by this. It's always interesting in some cases to see, because you'll have these, like I say, like the Japanese House movie feels like it was a big influence on Raimi when it comes to Evil Dead. There's a humor and like silliness and a slapstick, but all these like terrible things are happening in this house as these girls are getting killed. And a lot of that stuff would be considered unthinkable in, American cinema. But, Raimi was able to, bring that to the masses with, like I said, Evil Dead and especially Evil Dead 2. So I'm curious if the Blair Witch team saw this.
And there is, so about 9 to 10 years later, Dean Alioto made essentially like a bigger budgeted version of this movie called Alien Abduction Incident in Lake County. So that one was like a made for television movie, but they're working with a bigger budget. So it's kind of, in some ways, it almost feels like the Evil Dead 2 versus the Evil Dead, where you're dealing with a little more resources and that kind of thing. Yeah. So but yeah, for like what this provides in a runtime that's really like 63 minutes. So you're talking about just over an hour. It really flows well. It's funny because watching like home videos, like from the 80s, when I see videos from my family from that period, it feels just like that. It doesn't feel scripted at all. It just feels like what you would see, because especially when camcorders were such a new thing. I remember like my uncle was he like videotaped someone's grad party, and it was like a lot of it was like one shot. It was a one take kind of scene that,
because you just going. Followed it around.
Yeah.
You just kept it on your hand and just walked around with it.
Exactly. So this movie feels like that, where except now you have extraterrestrials that are thrown into the mix. So it definitely felt genuine, and I just love finding these kinds of movies. This is a movie like I wish that I had access to this when I was growing up, because it would have been like the perfect movie to watch at 2 a.m. at a sleepover, just when like the atmosphere is just right and you get creeped out by just the slightest like shadow in the corner. It's just such a perfect movie for that kind of atmosphere. And I feel like this would have been a really good like gateway horror movie in a lot of ways. But I'm glad I got to watch it now. Better late than never.
Yeah. And you know what? And I think 60 minutes is a good runtime for some of this stuff. Host was around that time, and that was perfect. That's what I talked about. Like, we don't need it stretched out in some cases. The Universal Monsters movies are all like 70 minutes, 80 minutes. So it's like, you don't need to be at an hour and a half if you don't need it. You don't need to be at 2 hours.
I know. I really like, I kind of want horror and just movies in general to go back to that, or to explore that format a little bit more, where you're dealing with, 60 to 70 minutes, because then there's really no filler. Like, it's all, the story just has no time to really slow down, and you don't really catch your breath, but in a good way. And this movie just really exemplifies that. And yeah, it's definitely interesting when you can find something like this that just feels like something you would find, like, looking through your grandparents' attic like years later, like, oh, what's this? It just has that kind of creepy realness to it. But definitely, I was like, when you see a runtime that's shorter rather than longer, it's a little more inviting based on just how busy everyone can get these days. It's easier to kind of squeeze stuff like that in.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. So something. And where do you watch it?
I watched it on Shudder.
There you go. Cool.
And as Scott would say, this episode isn't sponsored by Shudder, but we definitely love our Shudder around these parts.
Yeah. I was well, mine was Amazon, so I don't have anything, and I got nothing for you. But what's something I'll tell you and our listeners about, that I've been telling everybody about since I just finished reading it, is Junji Ito's Dissolving Classroom. And why would a classroom dissolve? Well, you'll find out. I thought I had caught up on all of the Junji Ito stories that had made their way stateside, and I had through Viz, but there's a Vertical Comics label, I believe, is under an imprint of Penguin, I believe, or Random House. I think it's Penguin. And I realized that they have a book that they picked up like in 2017. It was a little bit ago. It was originally published in 2013, but it's called Dissolving Classroom, and a couple hundred pages. And honestly, it's one of my favorite stories from him. So, I mean, in some cases, I've been picking up the anthologies, and I picked up Censor, and then those were okay, right? But like, he's really known for Uzumaki and for Tomy, and so those are some of his big ones. But I would put Dissolving Classroom right with it. It's really, really, really cool. And it's about a brother and sister who move into a new town. They start going to school. And, a lot of his stories, for people who haven't read them, they take place with school children's teens. And it's them, encountering not just evil, right, but evil within their classmates, their parents. And so there's a lot of it's dealing with a lot of coming of age, a lot of relationship issues, a lot of the way we see ourselves, that we see others. And, and with tremendous body horror. And so that's what he's known for. And that's what you get a lot of that in here. And so, anyway, so you have the brother and the sister, they come into town. And when they come into town, what do you know? Some of the classmates start, just like melting, and nobody's sure exactly what's causing it. And, there's the sister who came into town. She's running around. She's got like these wild eyes, and is kind of running around talking about how her brother worships the devil. And, and they ask the brother, and the brother is like, it's not me. He's like, ever since, my parents died or parents left, my sister, she hasn't been the same. And so, and he's always apologizing. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me, and so he's always very apologetic. And so you have this, very apologetic older brother. You have this younger sister who's, acting crazy and saying that, her brother's doing all kinds of stuff, and we don't know exactly who we should believe. So obviously things escalate. We learn a little bit more about this brother and sister, and the dissolving escalates as well. And I will reveal no more because I don't want to give it away.
Wow, that is quite the setup. Even for Junji Ito, that is very, very unique. But that's what I love about his storytelling, is that, there's no two stories are the same. It's so eclectic what he explores with horror. And I'm still kind of diving into that world that he's created on the page. But yeah, he really, truly is like his own version of Stephen King when it comes to just finding all these different ways to keep you up at night. And this sounds really intriguing, especially because it sounds somewhat related to the movie Spontaneous that Brian Duffield released a couple of years ago, based on the novel of the same name by Aaron Starmer, where like classmates start to spontaneously combust and they don't know why, and they're trying to figure it out. And that came out during the, in the middle of the kind of some of the worst stages of the pandemic. So I think those types of stories are very relatable now, just in general. And I love that type. I love Spontaneous. So I feel like I would love The Dissolving Classroom.
Yeah. This is, like I said, I highly recommend this one. I think that, Junji Ito, he's already a master of horror. He's already influential. He has been for years in a lot of cases, and I want him to. We're just catching up. And, it's not just, if he were just telling these stories by themselves, they're still compelling and interesting. But just as an artist, and to combine both of those, he's just such a powerhouse. It is like I said, you see that you can visualize that body horror. He doesn't shy away from it. It's the detail he puts in his characters' eyes and their face, and he's just so incredibly talented. And not out of stories, because there's still a back catalog that they're converting. Viz has been, because he's been selling so well over here, Viz has been working double time to bring more stories over. And we have Dissolving Classroom, as I mentioned, was released by another publisher. It's already out now if you want to pick that up. If you want to hold out till October or pre-order it, there's a collector's edition coming out through Viz, because I guess probably the rights reverted, and they're going to be releasing that, I think, on October, first week of October 4th, I believe. And so even though I own it, I still pre-order. I'm like, what's in the collector's edition? I don't know, but I want to read it. So
because they could put in like one or two additional short stories in there.
Exactly.
I love it. Or even author notes, I think, is fascinating. So whatever goodies, I'm sure they'll make it worth your while in the collector's edition. But Viz is amazing. Viz, I can't believe how accessible they've made Ito's work and so many others just in the recent years. I feel like they're introducing Ito to a whole new generation of readers stateside that maybe wouldn't have read him otherwise. So it's really nice to like go to Barnes and Noble and just see like a whole wall of Viz media releases. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, they're really, it's incredible the numbers that they're selling. And like people, you think of Marvel, you think of DC, and you're like, these are the biggest selling, obviously it's going to be, people are buying more copies of this comic or that comic or this character. And honestly, a lot of the manga and a lot of stuff from Viz and Junji Ito, it's outselling a lot of those in terms of single issues or single graphic novels. You add up all the Batman comics that are sold over the course of the year, like Batman's going to win. But in terms of like, single graphic novels and stuff like that, Junji Ito's pulling some really good numbers, which is really cool, because it means that more people will be exposed to his work, means that we'll continue to see more here. They released a short story collection not too long ago called Deserter, and it's his earlier work. So be able to read that and kind of see how his art style and his storytelling style evolved from that to some of his more recent releases is pretty cool. And it's like I said, we're living in a good horror time, right? Because it's like it's not just movies, not just TV or games. Like there's excellent horror manga. So if you haven't picked up any, I don't know, if you haven't picked up any, I'd kind of say like Uzumaki or Tomy. Those are like pretty much your go-tos. Once that gets you kind of, or Dissolving Classroom, and once that kind of gets you pulled in, read the short stories, read his adaptation and his own interpretation of Frankenstein, and there's so many others.
Yeah, Shiver, I know, has some really great short stories in it. But yeah, it's amazing. And I'm curious, like, we see how much like Stephen King is adapted now for movies and TV. I'm really wondering, I know there's been some adaptations of Ito's work already, but like in the next 30 to 40 years, like will more of his stuff get adapted, and will we see like the Stephen King level adaptations where like just the sheer, like where you just know that everything's going to be adapted into like a mini series or a movie. And, I would love to see like all these different filmmakers kind of have their, work with Ito to bring that stuff to the screen more often and really see what that would look like from different perspectives. And I know some of it might seem unadaptable too, just because it's so like he pushes boundaries and does stuff that's very out there sometimes, but it'll be interesting to see what might happen, when we're talking about Ito like 30 years from now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's just going to be the right adaptation, right? Because if Carrie had flopped, it would be a different story.
Yep.
And so I think it's just finding the right filmmaker who wants to do it and does it justice. They were going to do Tommy on Quibi, which I'm glad it didn't hit Quibi. It's still going to be somewhere, it looks like. I think Alexander Aja was going to take it on. Yeah. So I'm excited for it. I just didn't want to see it on Quibi. So hopefully, it gets reworked and we do see it on whether it's Netflix or Hulu or whatever. And hopefully that starts to kick some of that off, because Tommy's also, really goes into the body horror as well. I think what you need is a good budget, because you're doing a lot of practical if you want to do it right. I think you're enhancing some of it with CG. It's just his stuff, it goes so out there. Like, you need the budget to support that, because I think one of the things is, of course, there's a lot of horror from what you don't show, but what he focuses and specializes on in many cases is showing you it. So I think you do have to be able to pull his artwork onto the big screen. And how do you do that effectively? So I think that's the challenge there.
Mm-hmm. And unapologetically, where, it's like the Fulci's approach with the Beyond. Like, just when you think you're going to stop looking at the gore, he's like, no, you're going to watch like 2 more minutes of the score scene. Close up. Like, no, we're not looking away. So you definitely want someone like who's not afraid to go there and to really embrace it and not water it down, because I think, the longtime readers, they'll know, whether or not it was watered down when they see that come to life. So like you said, you need something that really, gets it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And speaking of books, I believe that you were reading Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yes. Apparently originally released or kind of known as just the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney, released back in the 1950s. We've seen it's interesting because this is one of those books that's been adapted so many times across so many generations. And I was like, I was really in the mood for like some 50s like sci-fi horror, like the kind of stuff that you see like at the drive-in, like in the 80s horror movies when they're watching a movie marathon, kind of like when we were just talking about popcorn on a recent episode and they're watching like the nuclear type of horror movie from the 50s. So I wanted to read this, and so I got it actually for Christmas this past Christmas, and I just dove in, and it was better than I expected. Like I thought, it's a great idea, especially it's been adapted so many times over the years. I'm like, it's certainly a great idea, but how is the book hold up to its adaptations? And it's so good. I mean, the writing is so good, and I think the reason it works so well is that Jack Finney puts a lot of like humor and everyday kind of slices of life into the book. Like, it's a very like comforting book in some ways. It's not like a cold sci-fi book. It's very like humorous. There's a lot of like tongue in cheek, like self-deprecating humor from the main character. And even if you took out the stuff about the extraterrestrials that come here and they start to like make duplicates of themselves, clones of the human versions, and the humans start disappearing. Like, even if you took out all of the sci-fi stuff, it's like just a really good romance. It's like kind of a story about how, what it's like to live in the same town your whole life. And just, just to like have that kind of surreal experience of kind of growing up in that same location. So there's just a lot to take away from this, like really small moments in the movie in the book, that work really well. And it's also really darn terrifying too. Like it's like the horror in the book is written so straightforward and matter of factly, where it's just like, oh, and this happened, and you're like, whoa, like there's no like paragraph description of something horrible happening. It's just like, well, then they saw this, and there's like a naked body on a storage shelf in the basement, and and then the characters all go upstairs and have a drink because they don't know what to do. So yeah, there's a lot of just really kind of relatable type moments in the book that really worked well for me.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I should read the book because, I mean, I love the original movie. I love the 70s one. I haven't seen The Invasion. I know you like that one, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, yes. That was my birthday movie in 2007.
Yeah.
Speaking of Nicole Kidman.
Exactly. Yeah. We came full circle. But yeah, I love the first two. I mean, it's just such an incredibly scary concept. It's, it's dealing with it in so many different ways too, because it's not just, it's dealing with my family is not my family. My spouse is not my spouse. This is not the person I knew. And of course you can deal with that outside of the alien concept, right? Is someone changing over time to the point where you don't recognize them anymore, a loved one. And so I think dealing with that concept is incredibly strong, but then also too dealing with kind of with the other, with everybody else being different, or everybody else seeing you as different, right? Everybody else has changed to the point where you're the only, normal or the only human one. And that can, and those topics are so timeless, whether, back in the 50s when the movie came out, it was about, everybody said it was about the Cold War and about the scare of communism. And of course, like I said, you could relate that now. And if the movie came out now, it'd say, people's fear about COVID or people's political fears. And so, this story, like I said, is timeless and will always be scary. And then also, of course, there's a sleep element. You fall asleep and then you're taken over, and that part too, all it takes is you just falling asleep for a little bit, that little blink, and then you're not you anymore. It's I should read it. I haven't, but I should.
Yeah. And it's a quick read too. It's like just under 200 pages. It's not, it's not the stand level length. It's a very quick read. It's just a lot of fun, and it's one of those where, like you said, it's timeless. I think, between this and the Puppet Masters by Robert Heinlein, those are those themes are never going to go away. Like it's very timeless themes of like, who can you trust, and paranoia, and not wanting to fall asleep until you check the closet in every possible place where a pod could be. It's you can transfer that to so many different things. But I was just really surprised by how fun the characters were, how real they seemed, like how much how relatable it is. Like there's moments where he's writing about the main character and he's like, well, if it was a movie, I probably would have done this, but because I don't, I'm not used to fighting someone, this happened instead. So it's like, there's no like overly heroic characters. It's just kind of real everyday people trying to deal with this concept that's so like otherworldly and over their heads, and just trying to get through it one day at a time. So I think it's a very relatable read. And I definitely want to read more of Jack Finney after reading this, because I know he's also known for his book Time and Again, time traveling book. So I'm curious to read that as well someday.
Yeah. Well, that was all I said. That's definitely. You should send me a link. Send me the. Did you get it on Amazon? Where'd you get it?
Yeah. My family. They got this. Yeah, the one that's probably the most popular right now. It's on Amazon. It's got a foreword by Dean Koontz, who's also a really big fan of the book. So yeah, I can definitely send you that. It's got a beautiful illustrated cover. I believe this version came out in 2015, and it was like an anniversary edition. So it's definitely as fun as it is to collect those like 50s paperbacks, I think this is a really good version too. So I'll have to send that your way.
Yeah, sounds good. And then
right after you're done reading the latest Ito.
Yes. Well, I finished Dissolve. Yeah, maybe we'll see. I have a gap right now, but I mean, I have comic books to catch up on, but I have a lot of comic books to catch up on.
Oh, I know. There's so many.
I have such a backlog.
Well, and there's just so many that are being adapted now too, where it's like that's kind of feels like the new go-to medium for adaptation. It's almost like the director, the storyboard's all there, so they know kind of from a visual sense where to go from. And there's just so many great publishers putting stuff out right now.
Yeah,
with comic books.
Yep. Yeah. No, you never run out. It's like movies. You can never run out. But yeah, one movie I had a chance to revisit. I did revisit one. So sometimes I say it and then I don't, but I did. I revisited this.
There's time for that?
Yeah, there is, right? Because Christy hadn't seen it. Came out just recently from Vestron. Stuart Gordon's 2001 Dagon. His continuation of adapting H.P. Lovecraft material with his own flair. This one gets frequently overlooked. And now with its recent, re-release to home media, hopefully some more people will check it out because, I think, maybe having seen it, and this is one of those situations that like, maybe when I had seen it like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I was like, oh, like this wasn't what I was expecting. And like, I really didn't gel with it. And then I saw it this time. I'm like, oh, I really like this. And,
nice.
Just to set it up for those that aren't familiar with it. It's this, super, this came out in 2001. So like there's a super rich tech guy who's, on a boat with his girlfriend and her parents or friends. I don't know if they're her parents. I think they're just friends. But anyway, but they're all out on this boat, and all of a sudden the weather, I don't know, he has a dream. He sees this, mermaid type creature and wakes him up, and so we know that something's wrong, right? But then the weather starts getting bad, and there's kind of like they hit something, and so they kind of hit this rock formation, and so the ship's taking water, the weather is getting worse, and there's a small town, and so our hero and his girlfriend, they head to the small town where it's this like they're like fish people. And you can kind of immediately see that like not everything's right when they first get there. They're like, we need to get help. And they're like some of these people who like, even though they like sort of look normal, they're like very sweaty, and they're just like, something's not right. And whether it's like, the Wicker Man or something like, something's not right. And they start, they start splitting up. And you kind of see like people like crawling around by, in the streets and the what do you call it, in the alleyways. And they're like all these like fish people. It's like people with like tentacles or people with gills. And they start chasing after our hero, who's just trying to escape and save his girlfriend and his friends. And, very interestingly, it feels a lot like, and maybe I did, because I didn't play these games like I didn't at the time. Like I didn't really think about it like that. But like watching it recently, like it feels like what do you call it? Like a
unreleased
like Resident Evil movie.
Oh, interesting.
In that like Resident Evil like Village. It feels like Village. It's like in like Village goes like they go to this, this Eastern European town where it's like it feels like it's like gothic horror. But if instead of gothic horror, like, our hero from Resident Evil went to Spain and he went to this wet and like sticky fish town where they worshipped Cthulhu, then, it'd basically be the same thing. And he's kind of like, they're chasing after him and he's like hiding, kind of like you do in the beginning of Resident Evil Village when you're like hiding from these creatures you see moving around trying to get you. Because like he's not able to fight them off. Like he doesn't have guns, just like you don't really have a lot of like weapons at your disposal at the beginning of Village. And it's interesting to just see this story evolve. Now Stuart Gordon didn't have the budget for this. It's another one of those situations where, he wasn't playing with the same effects budget that he had or production budget that he might have had for like, you know, like what do you call it? From Beyond. I almost called it The Beyond because you were talking about The Beyond. But From Beyond, and it just feels like this just needed. And you know what? I happen to look at some of the production art, and you can see some of what they had envisioned, and then they had what they had to work with. Still, you know, and then this is, you know, Spanish finance and is considered a Spanish film. It filmed in Spain, and so, you know, and then it was released there initially, which is why, you know, in some cases too, it wasn't as big in the States, but, you know, still a very worthy addition to his filmography. I would highly recommend this one.
This is one that's been on my radar for a while. And I remember when Vestron released this on Blu-ray as part of them bringing back a lot of horror movies from the last 30 years. On the Western Video Blu-ray line, like this is one that I really wanted to see. Especially, I watched the trailer and I couldn't believe, like, how does this movie not get talked about more in horror circles? Just based on, you know, Stuart Gordon directing it. It's based on an H.P. Lovecraft, a very popular H.P. Lovecraft novella. So yeah, the concept is there, and this is kind of like we would see him. This is a little bit before, like, he did Dreams in the Witch House for the Masters of Horror. So he had definitely, like, always had that fascination with Lovecraft stories, you know, going back to Reanimator. So like this is it's right, you know, right in that wheelhouse, and kind of released, you know, in 2001 in a time where I think horror was in a very interesting place, or like we didn't really know what direction horror was going to go in. We were right on the right before some of those like remakes that would start, and, you know, 90s horror had just come to an end. So the genre was in a very interesting place. And I feel like maybe if Stuart Gordon had made this movie in the 80s, when he was, you know, when horror kind of when it was that practical effects heyday, and he might have gotten more of the resources that he wanted, it would have been interesting. But I kind of love that this movie, you know, like Stuart Gordon got to make a movie like this in 2001, and people are still discovering it and talking about it. You know, now it's over 20 years later. So it's definitely, I think we're kind of going back and appreciating some of the movies, especially from masters of horror like himself, who are, you know, still working in the 2000s. Like, we're kind of going back and appreciating, you know, the stuff that they put out, even if it maybe didn't live up to what they had in their minds as far as that vision they wanted to bring to life. But this sounds like a really just cool concept, especially with the Resident Evil comparison. I think you could almost, it sounds a little bit like Silent Hill in some ways, like the early Silent Hill games. So I definitely want to check this out at some point. Yeah,
I mean, Stuart Gordon, you know, I do think to some degrees some of his work is underappreciated, because I think a lot of people go to Reanimator, rightfully so, it's great. But I think, you know, and From Beyond, obviously, you know, and when people are like, how do people not know what From Beyond is? But I promise you that it is a smaller group. It is like, if you just think about like horror Twitter, and you think about like I said, those social media circles, or like people who are watching movies in the 80s, or, you know, so if you're like a Gen Xer, but, or a millennial, but like Gen Z, like a lot of them are like, they're still discovering these, and which is great. I'm excited for them to do it. And that's why I kind of, you know, we'll talk about, you know, a filmmaker like Stuart Gordon, because I don't think too many people have seen, you know, Dolls. I don't think too many people have seen Dagon and From Beyond. And yeah, I think he'll continue to grow in popularity. It's, you know, it's one of the, you know, it's one of the weird things about, you know, getting older, and about what you realize about, you know, art and film as you age and watch younger generations, you know, stick to the new stuff. And it's because rightfully they will, but you lose so much of this older stuff. So it's really important to kind of say, hey, you know, You like, this new movie, and just kind of like you said, you like the sadness. Maybe you checked out The Beyond, and, and again, some of these things for our listeners, it may seem obvious. Like, how has someone not seen The Beyond? But I promise you the numbers are low. It's like more people have seen The Walking Dead than have seen, Night of the Living Dead, or at least more of the younger generation. When I talked, I was talking when I used to do, pre-COVID, when we do like zombie, conventions or panels and stuff like that, how many times I'd talk to people about Dawn of the Dead and they didn't know there was a remake. They thought Zack Snyder's was the original, and so because it's hard to get access to Dawn of the Dead unless you have one of the old, DVDs or Blu-rays, right? Like, I mean, you can get the UK has a Blu-ray now, but the US doesn't.
Yeah, it's still like, and it's kind of mind-boggling until you look for like Dawn of the Dead on home video, like how like you would expect, oh, there's got to be like 3-4 different Blu-rays at this point but it's like, no, I mean, I was lucky enough where I bought a DVD copy for like $15.
Yeah, I got the Anchor Bays.
Yeah, back in like I would just on a whim, like just 2006, I was just at the store and thought I'm gonna buy this, but I didn't think like, oh, this is going to be the last time. You were buying
gold. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I would have bought that whole store shelf if I could go back in time.
Yeah.
So it is, you need to bring awareness to it. And I think you find what people enjoy now. And then that's when you make those lists of like, well, here's 5 other things that you would probably really enjoy as well. And then they can, from there, it's like a phone tree where it just keeps expanding. And you can discover so many different types of filmmakers and subgenres within subgenres. It's amazing how much that can branch out.
Yeah. Like I said, there's so much for people to catch up on, which is, why we think it's important to, like I said, have these episodes where we're talking about things, we're suggesting things, and, whether it's new, it's sort of new, or it's, just new to us. Hopefully we have some suggestions that you enjoy and that you'll check out. And with that, this episode has come to an end, Derek. It went by so quickly, but I will be seeing you in person soon. So I'm super excited for us to get together. For our listeners, like I said, we will have an episode. Everything goes well, fingers crossed. We will have an episode live from the Overlook Film Festival. You can keep an eye out for any coverage we have. Although in some cases too, you're not going to see extensive coverage because it is our opportunity to hang out with each other for a little bit. Overlook is kind of like our summer camp. So sometimes like we'll have extensive coverage from like Fantastic Fest or like Sundance, but for Overlook, like we just like to hang out, which is funny, but we will do some coverage too. And we will do the episode because we're excited to do that. But we want to thank Brian, our engineer, for helping us out each and every episode. Thank you, Brian. And as always, we want to thank our listeners, including those of you who have signed up for a Corpse Club membership. We couldn't do this without you. Head over to corpseclub.com. If you want to check out our backlog of 250 plus episodes, you can find them there. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review helps. If you want to listen to Corpse Club, you can find us pretty much everywhere you can play podcasts. Google Play, SoundCloud, Amazon Music. We're pretty much everywhere. And if we're not, let us know. We'll add it there. If you want to get in touch, you can reach out anytime. We're at contact@corpseclub.com. On Twitter, we're at Daily Dead News. We're at Corpse Club. And on Instagram and Facebook, we're under Corpse Club as well. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay scary.